welcome to another edition of our Eat and Drink Real Estate Podcast. My name is Scott Burgess. Today I'm joined with probably the best combo we have on the show. We've got an attorney, LaSheda Brooks, and a broker, Shuatequa Johnson. Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So, as I said, this is probably our favorite combo of doing this stuff because you guys can kind of feed off each other and talk about, how you've helped each other. And obviously having a team where you guys work together is pretty important, as you can imagine. Tell us a little bit, maybe start with you, Shuatequa. How'd you get started in real estate? What's the story behind why you're here?
Yeah, so I basically got started in real estate. I was introduced to it by an old acquaintance, and he kind of talked about it a lot. And although he wasn't actively in the field or doing it, he had a strong interest in it. And his interest in it kind of sparked my interest. Mm-hmm. And so I'm very inquisitive. So I went out to go seek the knowledge that I was basically looking for.
Yeah.
I started jumping on Eventbrite, looking at all the free home buyer seminars, real estate seminars, trainings, and basically just getting into the rooms of people that were doing the things that I was looking to do. And that's basically how I kind of jumped into it, by just, seeking the knowledge and education and getting comfortable enough to just finally take the risk and jump into it myself.
Yeah, more as not an investor, but as an actual owner of property, a homeowner, so to speak.
Yes.
What kind of sparked your interest to being a broker? Like, was there kind of a shift where like, oh, here's where I want to, help other people, or what?
Yeah, so basically from my personal experiences that I experienced as being a homeowner and a landlord, mm-hmm. And I just feel like the lack of representation that I had when I first bought my property, going into it blindly, not knowing really a lot and having to deal with a lot when, first going into it.
Sure.
I just kind of wanted to help others avoid that experience that I had. And just kind of give them a better experience and, a trusted advisor who has the knowledge and who's basically just doing what they're looking to do.
More of like, hey, maybe what not to do as opposed to what to do.
Right,
kind of
yeah, that too as well. Okay. Definitely.
LaSheda, how'd you get started in all this?
Yes, so I got started because I was active duty military, so I'm a veteran. And some of the older sergeants, they would be like, why rent? Just buy. Like when you move to a different state, it's called PCS. So when you change station, instead of you renting, buy. It costs the same amount. Use your VA home loan. So I was like, I have a VA home loan? Because I joined at 18. I'm like, what is a VA home loan? What are you talking about, right? So they kind of would spark that interest. So I looked into it, and then when I would change the next station after that, I bought a house. I bought my first house, and I was like, oh, that was easier than what I would like to have thought it should have been.
Yeah.
And once I bought the first one, I was addicted after that. And I just continued to buy, and then I sold that one, and then the equity that was on it, and I was like, oh, so I'm getting this large amount of money at one time? Oh, yes, let's do this.
I could live with that. That'd be fine.
Yes, so I've been addicted ever since.
Fantastic. Now, and obviously those properties that you had, did you sell them all, or
Yes.
initially did you just sell them and, hey, I'm done with it, we'll start the new one?
Yes, and
Okay.
because I was young and moving around, initially I would just sell the property.
Okay.
So when I knew I was going to transition out, being an attorney, I knew that I was now transitioning from criminal to real estate because I was like, okay, this isn't hard. I can empower people, have a home, and then I also was doing wills and stuff in the military.
Okay.
So that's when I was like, okay, I can teach people about homes and trust and all of this language as an attorney. I don't have to be a criminal attorney.
Sure.
So when I knew I wanted to transition, I sold, my last station was in Florida. I sold my home and moved back to Chicago. And instead of buying a home in Chicago, I bought a multi-property. And that was my first multi-property unit.
So the switch to becoming more of a
The
landlord,
switch to
property owner as
becoming more
opposed to,
landlord.
okay.
Yes.
All right.
And once I did that, I was like, yes, people need to do this.
Okay. Now, what is the advantage really of having, say, a broker or an attorney in the process? We got a lot of folks that come on here and say, hey, we got to deal with some other myths or some other pitfalls, and some people will say, hey, I don't need an attorney, right? Or they'll say, hey, I don't need a broker, I can do this, especially what's going on recently with NAR. But tell me, what's the best advantage of having a broker?
Yeah.
What do you
so
feel is the biggest thing?
The best advantage of having me as your broker is one, obviously, I have the resources and knowledge that buyers and sellers are looking for to either acquire a property or sell the home. Also, I'm a trusted advisor. And so we practice what we preach. So
Okay.
we are actually doing and living in what other people are trying to do.
Doing
You
the
know what I'm
do,
saying?
not just...
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
And we are also relationship based. So we're not just transactional. Like we, walk alongside you. So you're basically kind of getting a 2-in-1 with us. You're getting a mentor and you're getting, somebody that's helping you through this process to buy a home.
Yeah.
And you'll hear us both a lot talking about multifamily properties or landlord because we are big advocates for that.
Okay.
We don't just advocate getting a home. We advocate, getting a multifamily property first and then buy
okay.
the dream home,
Okay.
later down the line.
Help build that wealth, so to
Right,
speak, for that
basically.
legacy, essentially.
Exactly.
And what about attorneys? If somebody says, attorneys, I don't need them. Like, what's the biggest kind of counter argument you can have to that? What's maybe some pitfalls or something? You got to have something.
So
going.
I think that statement in itself lets me know that they need an attorney because you have a mind frame of you know it all and you can do it all. And anytime that you're doing any type of contract, you're self-invested in it.
Yeah.
So you need a third eye, which would be me, who can make sure I'm properly negotiating for you and finding everything in your best interest. And I know that you're involved. You're too involved because you feel like you don't need anybody to help you.
Yeah.
So when people say that, I'm like, oh yeah, you need assistance because you don't know what you don't know. Like Shuatequa mentioned, I've been on each side. The seller, the buyer, the attorney. Like I've been the attorney for the buyer and the seller. Like I've seen this process. So you may miss out on something that's a good opportunity for you or that's a bad opportunity for you because you don't have an attorney and you think you know what you're doing. So it allows me to negotiate and advocate for that person, especially if you're a seller, as you already know with Citywide. I can also help like do the title search and represent and provide the title insurance and explain this process to you if you're selling your property and then help you know what to look for when you're buying a property and make sure their title agent or whoever they have is doing the necessity that they need to do. Okay. So it's very important for people not to think that they know it all.
Have people, when you might, and I'm sure it's come up where you've told somebody, hey, this is not for you, this is not a good deal.
Yes.
How do they generally react to that? Is it like, oh, okay, or are they're fighting you on it, or what's
They're fighting me on it,
okay.
Which again shows me you're too attached. You should not be that attached to a piece of property. It's
sure.
material,
yeah.
right? If it's not for you, it's not for you. If it's yours, it's yours. And we talk about different things when it comes to finding the multi-property home. Like a lot of people just like to go for things that look good.
Sure.
And like that's usually the problem. It looks good, so they want it. But underneath, it's not a good idea.
Sure. So let's get into that then. So
okay.
You guys are talking about a landlord and you're talking about multifamily. How can somebody maybe start from the beginning? How does somebody actually prepare for just any way to buy a home? Is there like a certain process you guys have, or how do you treat that?
Yeah, so everybody is basically different in understanding where they are in the process. Kind of helps me, but just for the general population, I say one, definitely start getting educated, right? The more you increase your knowledge and understanding the home process, the easier it becomes for you, and the easier it is, and you're more willing to jump into it and kind of just go ahead and move forward and take that risk, Okay. I think a lot of people have this fear of like it's just too hard because they don't have the knowledge to understand what they actually need to do to acquire a property. And so just, getting that education just makes it a smoother transition for them.
Is it tougher for like a first-time home buyer versus like if I've already owned property, let's say, like we were talking about moving around a bunch of times for whatever reason, the armed forces and stuff, is it harder for first-time home buyers, or is there certain things like the first time you got to know this? I mean, I would assume it gets easier as you go along, but...
Yeah, so I would say that's subjective. I personally don't think it's hard. I think you are at a greater advantage when you're a first-time home buyer.
Really?
Because you have so many benefits. You have lower down payments. There's a lot of grant programs that are willing to assist you. You get what I'm saying? you have options once you buy that first multifamily property to use for your advantage later down the road. So really understanding your strategy and goal is another thing you want to do to properly plan for that. You get what I'm saying? Like if you're just buying a property to live in it as a first time home buyer and then eventually, use that as equity to use as a down payment for your dream home.
Yeah, leverage it to something.
Right, basically. Or if you're gaining this property to build financial wealth for your family, or if this is just something you're looking to just get started into real estate, you have multiple options. Okay. You know what I'm saying? So properly educating yourself, coming up with a strategic plan and goal, and then obviously saving. You know what I'm saying? This is this is the big investment. So you want to make sure that you're properly saving and, budgeting and making better financial decisions, because this is one of the biggest financial decisions that you're going to make in your life. So, you want to make sure that you are ready from going from being a renter to a homeowner, because you have greater responsibilities now.
And you're walking these folks through this like, hey, we're going to cover this so you feel comfortable in what's going on, maybe not ecstatic about it initially, depending on price and everything else.
Yes, okay. I make the scariness go away. You know what I'm saying? Like people come like, oh, I'm nervous, and I just, reassure them that it's doable. You get what I'm saying? Like, and it's really a great experience. So.
LaSheda, what as far as maybe first-time home buyers or general buyers, there's kind of things you work with or look for?
Yes. So everything Shuatequa said, and I think the underlying basis that I try to focus on is mindset. And that's what makes my law firm unique. It's not transactional. I'm not doing this just for the money. I care about your mind frame and your future, because the goal is for you to build prosperity, right? And for you to be able to do that, you have to change your mind. Because if you think that it's better for you just to be a renter, unfortunately, we have to look at why do you feel that way. Is it fear-based?
Okay.
Right? Are you living off of someone else's experience? Like, oh, well, they were a landlord and they had horrible tenants and I won't be able to do. Like, are you just making excuses for yourself? Like, so I spend a lot of time during my consultations, like, getting to the mind frame. Why do you want to buy? What are you looking to do? Before I even, because sometimes people reach out to me and I'm like, okay, before I send you to my broker, let's talk about where you are mentally, because that's the key. That's what makes people feel whether it's difficult or not. It's the same old saying about whether the glass is half full or half empty. It's still water in the glass. Yeah. Like, it's water in the glass. At the end of the day, this is a glass and there's water in it. How you look at it is dependent on your mind frame.
Sure.
So a lot of times people, especially first-time home buyers, are just intimidated because they haven't really figured out, oh, I'm just basing my fear off of what somebody else told me, or my fear because of my lack of knowledge or my lack of understanding what's going on. So I will always send them like, hey, check out this YouTube video. Before I send you over to my broker, if they're saying like a lot of negative things or fear-based things, I'm gonna have them do a little bit of work first before I send them over, because I recognize that I want you to be successful. I don't want you just to get into this property. Now you're crying every night because you feel overwhelmed because your tenant didn't pay rent. No, it's fine. You do your best to proactively screen them. Yeah. Like, you learn from other people, like, okay, they had a tenant who don't pay rent. Let me make sure I do my proper proactive screening to try to get a financially, efficient tenant.
Somebody who's going to pay you on time.
Who's going to pay on time. Yeah. And then if they don't, I don't panic. I'm not panicking because they didn't pay rent. That's life. I call my attorney back up. That's me. And I'm like, all right, we slap them with a 5-day notice and we keep it moving.
Yeah.
You just got to keep
plan.
going.
Yeah.
You have to plan. And most people mind frame is kind of just stuck where they at. Okay. So getting them to open, be more creative, be more willing to be risky. Take the risk. It's fine. What's the worst that can happen? A tenant doesn't pay rent, then you're going to pay the mortgage the same way you would have paid your rent if you were a tenant. Like, what's the worst that can happen?
But when you say it like that, it's kind of laughable. It's like, well, yeah, I would have done that, but I guess you're kind of changing the framework of how they look at that.
Exactly.
Is there kind of one thing that either one of you would tell a first-time home buyer, like, here's my one surefire piece of advice? Is there something like that either of you have? Or?
Yes, I always say, which goes to my law firm, be intentional. Be intentional from the moment you select who's your broker, what type of home you want to live in, what neighborhood you want to live in, what are you buying. Like, be intentional with your choice and your decisions in the beginning, and it'll make everything smoother. Because if you are happy and intentional with this decision, if a tenant doesn't pay rent or if the water heater goes out, you're not going to lose it. You're not going to lose your mind.
Not going to give up and sell
You're
the
not
property.
going to give up. You're going to still be grateful. Like, I'm still grateful that I have a building that a tenant didn't pay rent in.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I'm still grateful about that. So I think that my piece of advice is always be intentional from the beginning.
Okay.
Be intentional with getting the education. You know, like, you just have to be intentional. Like, this is your choice, your own shopping experience. Make it yours.
Yeah.
I'm not going to buy this dress because Shuatequa thinks it looks nice on her. No, I don't like the way it fits me.
Okay.
Like, you got to get what fits you.
Shuatequa, do you have like one kind of like go-to idea for folks when they first come to you?
So any advice I would give them is to, like LaSheda said, you know, once again, education. I just think that builds confidence and, you know, makes the transition smoother for you as a home buyer.
Okay.
And then also, like, get a mentor. You're able to avoid all the mistakes that your mentor made. You're paying for convenience.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? Like, your mentor took a lot of the risk, and so now you're able to avoid those risks that they took and
Help you walk through it, essentially. Yeah.
help you, elevate to a higher level at a faster pace.
So speaking with all that, is there kind of one way when we talk about investing in real estate, is there kind of one path that you guys look at as far as an initial way to get into doing that?
Yes.
So, I would say, as a home buyer, to buy a multifamily first.
Okay.
Right. Buy a multifamily to basically use as leverage. You buy it, house hacking is what they call it now.
Okay.
Stay in one of your units, rent the other ones out for a year, and then use that as leverage to make a down payment for your next house using that equity
Okay.
from that property. And, you know, kind of start that way. So that way you're a landlord, you are a homeowner, you're an investor.
Yeah,
and
you've
it
done a
kind of
few
gives you,
things and now-
it kind of helps you transition to any other area that you might be interested in doing as
Okay.
well.
LaSheda, anything you want to add to that, or?
I agree. And I think adding the fact that we're in Illinois, we're in Chicago, that's unique to this area. So being intentional about where you live. Multi-units are a unique thing to this area, so you might as well utilize that and leverage it because you're here. That's not something everybody can do everywhere. So if you live here, you're a resident of Chicago, a resident of Illinois, then I think it's very imperative for you to take that opportunity. We don't have a lot of benefits in Midwest, especially during the wintertime. You know, but having a multifamily unit is definitely a benefit of us living in this area.
So a 2-flat, a 3-flat, a 4-flat,
Yes.
something along those lines.
Yes.
Okay. What when people talk about, speaking about buying stuff, and people bring up rates, probably not so much for you, but for you, when they say, "Oh my gosh, Shuatequa, rates are just, you know, they're so high right now."
Yeah.
It's all, we all know it's relative, but how do you kind of tackle that? That seems like a pretty common objection or hurdle for people to say, "Okay, I like what both of you have said. I'm going to do this, but man, rates are high." Like, what do you tell people with that?
The market's going to do what the market's going to do.
Sure.
You get what I'm saying? So I tell people, do not wait on rates. Like, and it eventually weighs itself out, right? So you buy now, and properties are multifamily properties are priced between $300 to $500 and potentially even more, right? You buy them at a 6% rate. Rates are always going to fluctuate and go up and down. You get what I'm saying? You can always refinance at any time.
Okay.
When the rates go down, there's going to be multiple buyers, and people are going to be essentially paying $20,000 to $50,000 more for homes than they would have if they would have just bought at the 6% rate. You get what I'm saying? So it's gonna weigh itself out. But then also you're gonna be having more bidding wars. We're having bidding wars now. I just sold a property for $500,000, and I had 10 offers on it, all asking and over asking. You get what I'm saying? People are still in the market buying now, so don't let rates scare you. You get what I'm saying? Because you just want to get the property.
Yeah.
You just want to get the property, and at any time.
So it might
you
not be
can
the cheapest rate, but now
Right.
I've owned it for a year, and now all of a sudden rates drop, and now somebody's coming to a property that I've owned for a year or two,
Right.
gets into a bidding war. Yeah, maybe I paid a little bit higher rate up front, but now I'm getting more on the back end with the equity. Is that fair?
Exactly.
Okay.
Yep, definitely.
Is there anything, LaSheda, you see with that? Is it anything you can add to that as far as
So I would say
rates? If people say, "Oh my gosh, rates! Is
Yes.
this good? Is this
So,
bad?"
not as an attorney, but as a person who bought another multi-unit while
Okay.
the rates was high, just do it. So of course, when I bought my first, the rates were very low. I had the benefit of having a low rate for my first multi-unit, but then when it was time for me to buy more, rates were high.
Mm-hmm.
Am I not going to buy just because rates high? For me, as a buyer, I said no. I bought my multi-unit. My rate was high. However, I've only had that building for about a year, and it's already gone up in equity.
Okay, so you're making it up on the back end
I've already
again.
made it up
same-
on the back end. My
Okay.
equity is up, and even with the neighborhoods, with like she said, the bidding war, that affects me as an owner because now my building is in that neighborhood. They're selling for way more than I bought my building for just a year ago.
And that's
So-
good.
And that's great for me, right? But
We
if I
hope.
would have just let something as small as the rate, that's one factor. That's only one thing. And
Yeah.
all of these other beautiful things have occurred within a year. I wouldn't even be reaping the benefits asset-wise if I would have let the rate stop me.
Okay. Now, is there a better time of the year, or is there a? I don't know. You hear people say this all the time. Is this a good time to buy? Like, how do you? Is there a time of year? Is there a beginning of the year, end of the year, summer? Like, how do you respond to that essentially?
My response to that is buy when you're ready.
Okay.
Don't let a season determine whether or not you should buy.
So it's more
If you can
determined on me
afford-
as a
right,
buyer.
for you.
I'm ready to go. Let's do this.
Exactly.
Not,
Your individual
it's March.
situation.
Let's wait till September.
Exactly. If you're ready to buy,
Okay.
you have done the work, you have properly prepared, then buy now. Don't wait until whenever the seasons change. Buy when you're
Okay.
ready to
Yes.
buy.
Okay. And that seems pretty common sense, but
Yeah.
you'd be surprised. I don't think a lot of people think that way.
Yeah.
Is that maybe tied to people think it's complicated or it's difficult to qualify? What do you say to folks like that if they come in, and I know you touched on it earlier briefly, but they say, "Oh my gosh, I'd like to buy a property. I just don't know if I can. I don't know if that's something that's in the cards for me." How do you respond to stuff like that?
Yeah, definitely just having the initial consultation with me. And so people think it's harder than what it really is. Like I mentioned earlier, it's attainable. You get what I'm saying? And people be thinking they have to do way more than they really have to. And that's why, I like to have consultations with people when they contact me and they say, hey, I want to buy, but I'm just waiting on this. I'm like, let's have a conversation so I know that you're actually doing what you need to do to
Okay.
properly prepare.
Not just
you
an
get what I'm saying?
excuse.
Right, exactly.
To get out of doing it. That sounds bad, but
Exactly. Some people think they have to have 20% down. I'm like, no, as a first-time home buyer, you don't have to have that.
Okay.
You know what I'm saying? Or you're doing all this other stuff that you don't even need to do when you could have had that conversation with me months ago, and I could have came up with a strategic plan for you, to help you properly prepare within that 3 months, and you're actually doing what you need to do versus what you think you need to do.
Why do you think that is? Why do you think it is that people think that way? Is it just based on someone else? You said it earlier, based on somebody else's experience, a buddy, a friend they talk to, family member, or is there something else going on where they're just I don't know, where they think it's difficult because it's not.
Yeah.
From what you're saying, but why do you think they come to you like that?
Yeah, I think it might be social media. A lot of people, there's a lot of information on the internet, misleading information on the internet, and people are thinking that they have to do way more than they really need to do. And so they're going off the perception of what the internet is telling them versus contacting a trusted advisor who does it on a daily basis.
Stop listening to the internet.
Exactly. Stop listening to the internet. People are so easily influenced by the internet or social media. And so I think that's a big part of it. And then also just not having the knowledge and resources of the people around them that are doing what they're looking to do.
Okay.
You get what I'm saying? Like I mentioned earlier, I didn't have that either. And so I had to be proactive and get into those rooms where people were doing what I was looking to do.
Okay.
And I don't think a lot of people actively do that. So they kind of just go based off what they know.
Yeah,
you know,
what they've heard or buddies say,
exactly.
Hey, this was terrible, and now they think it's always going to be that way. Is that kind of what your experience is as well? Just
yes. So I think that
misinformation, I guess.
The misinformation, but also people don't actually execute. So we have a lot of thoughts because we're talking about people thinking and hesitation. Yeah. They're just thinking and they're just having thoughts. But if they picked up the phone and called an attorney, pick up the phone and call a broker, like if they take an action step, those are the people that become homeowners, right? Those are the people that begin to build wealth and build prosperity. It's just the execution. A lot of times people just think and that's it. They think, they watch videos on YouTube, and then they do nothing else after that.
Yeah.
And that's what keeps them, unfortunately, in that little mind frame that they're in because they don't execute.
Yeah.
But once you, because you can think anything, right?
Mm-hmm.
I could think something that's hard. Like, okay, this is my first time doing this. This is going to be hard. But then once I do it, I can no longer have that thought anymore because I did it. So regardless of where my mind wants to go, I have actually completed the task. So I think, unfortunately, a lot of people remain thinkers.
Okay.
They just stay.
And you're trying to engage them, have that first conversation to say, hey, this is not as bad as you think, and let's get one out of the way.
Exactly.
Is
and
that fair?
It's so fair to say that, and that's what I focus on. Trying to be relatable enough to get them to open up to me so that I can see what the problem is. Because it's a reason why you haven't executed. Yeah. It's a reason why if you're telling me that you pay the same amount of money in rent as I do in mortgage, and that doesn't bother you, something's going on in your mind.
Sure. We got to figure out what it is.
Yeah, what is that? We're paying the same amount of money.
Okay.
Why don't you want to own it instead of just keep paying the same money? Oh, well, then I have to be responsible for utilities or water bills. I'm confused. Let's talk about that.
Yeah.
And it's like helping them get through those thoughts to demystify whatever's holding them back. I have found to be the most helpful in getting people started when they're like first time homeowners or they want to be investors and just don't know where to start.
Well, talking about demystifying, let's talk about being a landlord. Like, is there any, because you guys have both talked about it a lot and talking about the multifamily, is there anything special that you got to do? Is there anything that, like, oh my gosh, if I could go back and start over and do it a different way, is there any kind of one thing or something that sticks out to either of you of like, it's either not that tough or it is that tough, or was there just stuff you need to do? What do you think about being a landlord? Like, what's helpful, I guess?
Well, it's definitely an experience. So let's be clear. It's an experience, and I think taking away the idea of it's a good or bad experience is helpful.
Okay.
Because, yes, there are ups and downs, but being grateful that you have this type of blessing, I think will help people get rid of the bad experiences. Like, this was a horrible thing. This is bad. I have to pay for this. I have to take care of this. But if you release the idea that that is bad, it's just a responsibility that comes with it. Like when you have a parent, some people can say being a parent is a bad thing or a good thing. But the bad things are really just the responsibilities that come with being a parent.
Yeah.
So all of the bad things about being a landlord, it's really the responsibilities that come with it. So when you just gain that confidence and that education, you accept them as just an experience. Because it is definitely an experience. I will not say that it is not a ride. It's a ride, but I would not get off the ride. I wouldn't, do anything differently. I think going into what we touched on, Shuatequa will talk about having mentors. I think it's imperative to be around people that's doing it, because then it also you feel less like pressure. Like, am I doing something wrong? Is it me? Is this horrible?
Get something from their experience too, kind of helps you. Like,
but when you go
I'm not the only one feeling that.
Yes, and all 5 people was like, oh, I've had to serve evictions. It becomes more normal. Like, oh, okay, so it's okay that I have to evict this person?
All right.
Yes, that's fine. So you have to surround yourself with people who are where you want to go. Or even if you have somebody that want to go there too. Like, we are friends from college. We know each other from college previously.
Okay.
And throughout college conversations, we knew we wanted to be great but didn't know how. But then we just always had that connection to say, like, hey, I want to do this. What do you think about it? Even if I have not done it, I'm going to encourage her to do it because I understand the mind frame of, well, try it and see. I mean, I'm here if you fail.
Shuatequa, what about you? As far as like being a landlord, is there anything like, just kind of helped you get through it, or is it just, I mean, you get, once you are a landlord, so let's say you close on a multi-unit, within that first year, do you kind of get that confidence? Is it something you get relatively quickly? Or is this something that like, it's going to take you a few years to get used to what's going on being a landlord? Is that?
Yeah, so I think that you kind of basically just learn as you go.
Trial by
Which
fire.
is what I did. My first property, I bought a 4-unit building. And in addition to that, I did a 203K loan, which is a renovation loan that they include in your mortgage for you to make any renovations you want to do to the building. So I renovated the entire building from ground up.
Wow.
And so, like
You
I
didn't
said,
start
I kind
easy, did
of exactly. I kind of jumped into it early with a lot of learning lessons. So yeah, I honestly just learned as I went along. When you kind of just figure it out, and reach out to the resources or people that you're connected to. I reached out to my realtor. I reached out to my inspector. When it came to contractors or any city things that I needed to get done.
Yeah.
So
it's
just
okay to
you're
ask
right.
for help. Yeah,
Exactly.
I mean, okay.
Exactly. And I kind of just built my resources up from there, just based off personal experiences and going through what I had experienced. And I just, basically became knowledgeable from my own experiences. So, having a mentor can definitely help you avoid all of those.
Speed that process.
Right,
You can do it
exactly.
on your own, but boy, if you got somebody to ask, like,
Exactly.
did you go through this? Yeah, I did. Okay. Here's
Exactly.
What I did. Okay, that kind of help.
Reaching out to people who have done what I was in the process of doing to make that transition smoother for me.
Okay.
But yeah.
And I would add to that's also part of the experience. Some people may not respond.
Okay.
You may reach out to talk to someone and they may say, no, leave me alone, or they may ask for a huge amount of money that you don't have. That person is just not for you. You just keep going.
Find somebody else.
Find somebody else. So
Okay.
you may not find that mentor, immediately. It might not be the first person that you reach out to.
Okay.
You may become a landlord and have contractors run off with your money, or people come and steal supplies or those are a part of the experiences. So that also is just a learning lesson. And as you find quality, loyal people, you just lock in with them and just keep it moving. It's just a part of the experience.
Find a good broker. Find a good attorney.
And you just stick with it. Like, if you come back and your plumber took your water heater, you don't panic.
That sounds personal.
You don't panic. You just call your attorney.
Yeah.
And see if you can get a couple threats to get it back.
Right.
And then, so I think that if people just release the idea that it has to be perfect, or in one shot, this is going to work out, or if this phone call doesn't work, or if this DM doesn't meet that connection, then I'm not supposed to move forward.
My life is over. I'm finna
Yeah.
bail. Yeah.
Right.
And I just want to mention another thing. Like, everybody has their own personal experience. So just because somebody had a horrific experience being a landlord doesn't mean that's going to be my experience.
Sure.
I had friends who were landlords and they had horrific experience with tenants. I have been blessed to never have those horrific experiences, and I'm grateful. But I've had my own horrific experiences as well. Yeah. So,
well, hopefully you're learning from what.
Exactly. But they've all been learning lessons, and I'm appreciative of them now. Being in them in the moment, it might have seemed frustrating or, just upset about it, but it's all been I'm able to use it for my benefit now and be able to help others and lead them through this process because I've been through it and I experienced those things early in the game.
You're being like a mentor to them, essentially, is what, what you all been preaching here.
So they definitely get 2-on-1 with us. They get trusted advisors and mentors. And so, just, not being afraid because you've heard somebody else experience.
So if we're talking about experiences with investment properties, how do you evaluate a property? Is this going to be a good investment? Is this going to be a good units building for me to invest in? Like, how do you come up with that? Is there math involved, or is there other things that you do? How do you figure that out? Or how do you approach it, I should say?
Yeah, I think that's subjective, but for me personally, if the numbers make sense, then it's a good investment property for me. I personally don't like to acquire a 2-unit if I'm not making a profit of minimum $500 after all expenses and the mortgage is paid.
Okay.
And then with multi-family, so 3 and 4, if I'm not at least making $1,000
Okay.
after maintenance and mortgage, then I personally
So you have
don't
kind of
go.
a hard stop.
Yeah,
With, hey, if it's
exactly.
$400, then it's a no.
Exactly.
Most likely.
Exactly.
Okay.
And I just feel like any property that you get, a multifamily property, you should be receiving a profit off of it.
Well, hopefully, yeah.
Yeah. Like, yeah, you know, you don't have to pay a mortgage, but I just feel like you shouldn't have to pay a mortgage and you should be getting a profit.
Okay.
And you should be using it as leverage. So, that's how I kind of basically determine whether or not it's a good property.
Do you have a kind of a different formula, kind of the same formula? How do you look at that stuff? How do you evaluate a property?
So for me, I look at it a little differently because I also do the estate planning, and I'm thinking about people's full assets and their full portfolio. So when I'm talking to my client, first thing I think about is what are their goals? Because not everybody wants to be a landlord. From my aspect, that's okay with me. You know, you may not want to be a landlord. You may not want to create wealth through your properties, and that's okay.
Okay.
So for me, it's not a hard stop for me on numbers.
Okay.
When I do have a client who wants to move forward with a home or a multi-unit, it doesn't really matter. I am really big on my legal answer is always it depends. Let me see if there's liens. Do they have administrative hearings going on? Let me look at the land use in that area. Let's look at the neighborhood. I look at the paperwork behind the building.
Okay.
And what's behind those walls. Like, how much is it going to cost you to fix this up? A lot of new property, the cosmetics is pretty. It's pretty, but in 3 years, that's going to crumble. You know, that's going to settle in a little bit, and then that's going to come out of your pockets. So I look at behind the walls, really big for me, and the paperwork. What does this building say on paper? What's the profile of this building on paper? Okay. And is that worth you taking on these citations and fines, especially in the city of Chicago? There's always something back there. It's always something, you know, like, is it worth you taking that on? Do you have the capacity to even handle that?
Does that meet, or can that meet your goal for this longer term? Okay.
Exactly. So I look at it a little differently just because I'm thinking about my client's full, you know, portfolio.
Sure. So now that we've got a property, however we've come about that decision, what are some pitfalls or hurdles you guys see getting to closing with, say, we'll pick on the first-time home buyers again. What kind of hurdles do you see getting to the table? Like, if we got to close in 60 days out, like, what's the biggest, maybe not the single biggest, but what's a big issue that you guys see getting to the table?
Yes. So a biggest issue is usually when people have lenders, there's a lot of different requirements. And in general, buying a house, there's a lot of paperwork and legal documents, and they get overwhelmed. So they miss some of the requirements. Okay. Lender may have requested something and they didn't turn it in, or they forgot to turn it in. Another thing is a lot of people aren't necessarily bookkeepers in the natural way of sense, like they take care of their accounts. So there may be things they have to explain in their bank accounts. And I think people are never prepared to share their bank accounts with their lenders. And that's one of the biggest hurdles I always have. People's like, well, I have this money here, this money here. It's like their money is all spread out, or their money's all together, and all you see is they buy Starbucks, they buy, you know, junk food and stuff. It's like, where do you pay your rent at? Like, they need to see consistently. So one of the biggest hurdles is their bank statements. And showing that you are a quality, like that you're going to pay your mortgage on time, like you're responsible, you're financial. And I think people are so unprepared for the knowledge of, I have to expose my financial lifestyle to my lender. So I do take on that part too, you know, more than just a lawyer, help coaching them through, you need to clean up your account, your statement account, you know, like give yourself $500 a month for, you know, food, drinks, and put that here. Put this money, like I help them kind of clean up their accounts, so then when they lenders see the bank statements, it's not like, I need a letter of explanation for this transaction, I need a letter of explanation for this transaction. Like, it's just so many letters of explanation to get to closing day. That slows us up.
So if you were looking for a renter I mean, essentially that's what the bank's doing. They're looking at you as a possible tenant or a renter from them for their money, essentially.
Yes.
Treat it the same way. You know, if that person came to rent from you and it's all kind of crazy and all over the place, like, how would you feel?
How would you
Yeah.
feel?
Is that a fair?
Yes,
Yeah.
that's so fair.
Okay.
Like, how would you feel? Just look in the mirror for a second. Would you give you $300,000?
Yeah.
Like, think about it like that.
It's funny you say that because it is kind of a perspective. I think people think of it as a house, not $300,000.
Yeah.
Yes, the
And when
bank
you look
does
at that,
not
that
want
kind
your
of
house.
changes how I. Oh, okay, all right, yeah.
Yes, they don't
Okay.
want your house. They want you to have your house. They just want to make sure they get their money back. They don't want your house.
Yeah,
They
don't wanna
want
be
the money.
landlords, yeah. Anything you can add to that, or do you see like certain behaviors or stuff that like, oh my gosh, we're closing. Why are you doing this?
Right. Yeah, definitely. You can have the buyers that want to go apply for a new credit card, or they want to go apply for a new car, and it's like, no, wait till after the transaction is done. Or they want to switch jobs. You know, those are
Yeah.
definitely all things you do not want to do during the home buyer process.
And we're all smiling because we've all seen it
Exactly.
happen, unfortunately. But I mean, it
Exactly.
happens.
Yeah.
Well, that's awesome. Very, very good information. We thank you both for coming out today. I think we had a pretty good conversation here.
Yeah.
What is the absolute best way to get a hold of you? Like, what's the easiest way to get a hold of you? What do you prefer?
So I can always be reached on Facebook or Instagram. On Facebook, my name is Shuatequa, the real estate broker, and Shuatequa is spelled Shuatequa. And then on Instagram, Shuatequa, the RE broker. And then also my cell phone number is 708-320-1636.
Okay.
And my personal phone is 773-710-8731. And
Fantastic.
I am located at Hyde Park. My office, I am with Coldwell Banker.
LaSheda, what's the best way to get a hold of you?
Yes, so the best way for me is online. So Instagram and LinkedIn and Facebook. It's all Intentional Legacy Law Office on all platforms. If you go to those platforms, you'll have access to my Calendly link, and it's amazing to just book a session or consultation. That's the best way to have access to me. You can also call me at area code 312-307-2627, and more likely than not, I will send you my Calendly link. So the choice is yours on how you want to get that link.
All right.
But my consultations and sessions I don't charge for, so go ahead and just get on my calendar, and then I can know what you need.
Fantastic. And we'll put our QR codes on the bottom for everybody so
Yep.
folks can reach you easily. Well, thank you so much for both coming out here today. I think we had a pretty good conversation. I enjoyed it.
Yes,
Thanks so much.
definitely.
Thank you,
Thank
Sky.
you.
All right.